Hi, this is Doug Whedon with thewalledgarden.net. Religiosity is often exposed or expressed or manifested in what I call juvenile Christianity. Okay, it's kind of a junior high approach to the gospel. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a minute and think about that. Juvenile Christianity is a pursuit of the externally dramatic. It's always doing something to try to pique our sensuality, to try to excite us, to make us, to change our mood, to give us kind of an uplift and inspired kind of feeling. It avoids the mundane. It avoids the everyday pragmatic things that we want to do, and rather than staying sacrificially behind the scenes, it wants to do something exciting and out in the social view. Something socially impressive. It's kind of like wanting to die in some exotic place rather than to live behind the scenes in something that's just boring and nobody knows that you're doing it, but you got to do it because God has asked you to do it, and nobody's going to know except Him. That's an idea of juvenile Christianity. It tends it tends to equate being moved by the Spirit as something sensual, as something exciting. It replaces deliberate obedience with some kind of exciting moment to be a part of. Does that make sense? What it does is it melds together our old nature and an amiability with God, so that our sensuality is piqued, while at the same time our guilt and our spiritual depth is kind of pacified. And so you get this kind of junior high approach to the gospel, and the people who are involved in that wonder why things aren't working like they talk about in the scriptures. You see, it just kind of confuses and saying, golly, for some reason, there's no power in this. So what's that look like on an everyday basis? Juvenile Christianity tends to gravitate towards things like gutter to glory stories. You see, whether or not you want to listen to one and get high, or whether you want to give one and get high, it doesn't really matter. And by extension, it wants to go to some exotic place, and it doesn't even have to be exotic, but dramatic. Let's say dramatic. You want to go to a dramatic place and be able to come back and have a story to tell. It's that social focus of wanting to pique our sensuality. And that's what our old nature allows this. It doesn't mind at all if someone wants to follow God, as long as our sensuality is melted to it, you see. And so you get this pursuit of a rush, the pursuit of an adrenaline high, and define that as really getting close to God, because it just gives you the shivers, Unfortunately, that's not what God is trying to do. Of course, our emotions are involved in it, but only as a byproduct. It's not the center of our life with Him, and our emotions revolve around everything that we do. but only our old nature wants to take our emotions and bring it into the center and make us make decisions based on how we feel, or be motivated, to do this or that based on our mood or whatever. That's our old nature. But when we come to repentance, our emotions are pushed out to where they're supposed to be. They're there for an enhancement of our lives. They're there to orbit around us, and they bring meaning in some other issues that we'll talk about at another time. But the whole point is, when we are pursuing a dramatic or sensual experience, it's along the lines of religiosity and what we would call juvenile Christianity. So not only in this kind of juvenile picture do we gravitate towards stories and gutter to glory things, but we also gravitate towards things that are socially impressive. Things like politics, things like celebrities, things like business and organizational successes, and begin to fawn over people who are impressive on a social level. And we tend to sideline, people who are involved in something mundane. And James talks about that in the scriptures, is that he draws a real clear picture of us playing favorites along the lines of this juvenile Christianity. It's just part of our old nature. It's just normal, actually. But when we come to repentance, that is not something that's supposed to be continuing, because the adherent to juvenile Christianity misses the point, and they're left powerless in the everyday things of life. And I think there's a basic frustration there for people, because they didn't know that they were barking up the wrong tree. He didn't know they were melting together two opposing ideas, you see. God's very clear about what he's after, and it's not the pursuit of piquing our sensuality and getting us excited about something. So, the question is, are people who are adherent to juvenile Christianity, have they come to repentance? Well, that's not my call. That's a question that's been asked, but that's not my call. No one knows that. They could be, and they might not be. So that's not even the issue. But when an individual finds themselves in that cycle, and they begin to, think there's something fishy going on here, and they can kind of see this dynamic occurring, we need to know that God can rescue us out of that picture. He's actually trying to get us out of that picture. But a lot of times we need to know that's the cycle that we're in. But those cycles can be stopped, and he can bring us to a place of fulfillment. He can bring us to a place where we push those emotions off into another place, and it's not the focus of our lives. And we can define Christianity along a different line than along the peaking of our sensuality. Well, I encourage you, step out of the world system, come up for air, and take a breath.